Welcome back to the Diary of the CFO show. Today, I'm so excited to have with me a special guest, Miss Beverly Davis. She's the founder of Davis Financial Services, and I'm so pumped that she's here. She's a great voice on LinkedIn, and she has over 20 years of diverse corporate finance experience. So every time she posts, every time she shows up, she's bringing deep expertise in transformational back office operations, internal control, finance strategy planning. Thank you so much. So tell us a little bit about your leadership journey.
Hello, Asia. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. We've connected on LinkedIn and we've kind of went back and forth a few times. And so I really appreciate it. It's lovely to see your smiling face. And congratulations on the podcast.
Thank you. Super excited you're here. So, woo-hoo.
I'm super excited to be here. Okay, a little bit about me and my leadership journey. I, as you said, have over 20 years of experience in corporate finance, back office, jumped around a little bit, went to different areas of the bank. Luckily, I feel lucky for that now because it gives me, much more broader perspective of the financial piece of the business. I was on the business side and the operation side. So I get to, I learned how to connect the two pretty well. I started out in Bank of America, customer service, very basic. I went from there, was kind of noticed for the work I was doing there, took it very seriously. Went from there to, wealth management. So that was a big jump. I went there as just part of the operations department, but then I moved into a trust administrator position there in about, I would say, 2.5 years. And I stayed there for quite a while. And that was the bulk of where I really started to learn and love finance, was when I was there as a trust administrator. And this is all back office. Moved from Bank of America to JP Morgan. I worked in investment banking there, back office. And also at Bank of America, before I moved to JP Morgan, I moved to securities operations. So I worked in back office and securities. Then I went to investment banking in JP Morgan. Again, back office, though, never front facing with the customers. Really learned a lot there. Moved from there to Citi. And at Citi, I had several different. First, I was in internal controls, compliance, internal controls. Moved from there to, I was still within syndicated loans, but then I moved to the front a little bit where I was actually managing loans and working with the internal customers, of other banks there, handing this kind of managing syndicated loans. And I moved back to internal controls and compliance for a while there. And I stayed there, I think, for a total of maybe 6 or 7 years. Moved from there, finally decided I really like what I'm doing. I really like managing money. I like the strategy part of it. I really like the compliance part and the internal controls. Moved from there to running my own business. Left corporate banking. I was also commuting. So that was a part of it. Commuting. Ended that, I wanted to do what I did for the banks for just random businesses. I really liked what I was doing, but I realized everything I do is for this one bank. Everything is for Citi. Everything is for JP Morgan, and I was like, how can I take this information that I've learned in the corporate world and just help other businesses, different businesses, not always doing the same thing for the same company. That's the piece that I enjoy the most. And that's what I've been doing for about 14 years now, since I left.
That is amazing. And I currently am the CFO of a lending institution, a not-for-profit lending institution. So we do provide loans to small business entrepreneurs. So the lending piece is always good, but you can see the impact when you're working with people directly. So I totally understand how you will feel more fulfilled getting to be hands-on and seeing how your clients are thriving.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's hard for people to understand why they will need somebody like you to come in and help them, because not everybody understand what strategic finance is, right? We understand finance in general, but what is strategic finance for a business owner?
I'm glad you asked, because a lot of times I get a lot of questions, I get a lot of inquiries, consultations, and that's why I love the consultation, because it kind of explains. Sometimes they don't need a strategy consultant, and sometimes they do and they don't know it. But to answer your question, what is it? What is strategy consulting? It's more than a plan. It is when you have a specific goal that you are trying to achieve, and you have the step, you need help with the steps to get there. And
Mm-hmm.
you need a strategy. First, you have to plan. Then you need a strategy that puts that plan into motion. And so, what I
Mm-hmm.
do when I work with clients, first I ask them, what is their goal? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And then we go from there. And I'll ask them, what are they doing now? Because sometimes they do have a plan. And then I'll say, okay, now we're going to build a strategy around the plan that you have of how we're going to execute that and get to the
Mm-hmm.
result that you want. So that's, I don't know if that's a long-winded way to say it, but that's pretty much what it is. It's just providing the actual steps that you are going to take. And it involves, of course, there's nuances there. There's research to make sure you're making the right steps and things like that.
Okay. So, what are some of the blind spots that you think or common pitfalls that businesses face when it comes to strategic finance? Like you mentioned, sometimes they don't know they need it, or sometimes they have a plan, or maybe the plan is not really what they should be having. Like, what are some of the things you observed?
Off the top of my head, one of the biggest ones is maybe misalignment with their plan. And what I mean by that is sometimes they have a plan, but it's not executable for them. Maybe they don't have the ability to really implement it. And maybe they do, but they are not going about it. But I think the biggest one that I see off the top of my head is misalignment with how they plan to get to their goal. And I help them to line that. I spend a lot of time helping businesses line that misalignment back up. I think also now, I think a lot of people are getting it, a lot of other business people are getting into it. But another
Mm-hmm.
big one is lack of scenario planning. They look at like the initial risk, but when you really get into strategy planning and doing a lot of the research, I like to look at risks that you may not even think are possible. So they say, we have looked at risk for this, and I'm like, well, what if this happens? What if this, think a little bit outside of the box because,
Yes.
the way things are now, anything can happen.
Any,
Anything can happen. So,
yes.
so I think they also have a lack of scenario planning as far as their risk management when they're going into some type of strategy. And I also think they have too many options sometimes. I would say no more than three ideas. They spend a lot of time, too much time almost, with the planning and the deciding part to get into
Mm-hmm.
the execution part because they have so many ideas. And I'm like, my job is to bring them down and to say, okay, let's take three of these ideas and choose one. Because
Nice.
I've come in and they have start meetings and they're like, well, they give themselves maybe 3 months, worth of meetings and deciding. And I'm a person that, like everyone else, let's cut down on the meetings.
Amen to that.
And I'm like, yeah. And when I come in, it's like, well, one of the first other things, other than the misalignment and the risk, let's first of all set the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
You need to narrow some of these ideas and things down to three best ideas. Pick one of those, and let's start. The strategy and moving forward. A lot of people spend 3 to 6 months trying to decide on a strategy. In the way business is running now, in most cases, that's too long.
You
You
need
know,
speed.
yeah, you need speed. But I
Yes.
think that's the biggest ones for me. And maybe I would say one more quickly is not incorporating non-financial factors in your strategy. I think also.
Okay. Tell us more. Come on. Give us more. What kind of non-financial items should I be thinking about?
Customer satisfaction, employee engagement, things like that. This goes almost back to a little bit of the misalignment. They have this idea of what they want to produce, and I'll say, after just spending some time with them and with the different teams and things, and I'll say, well, there's a huge lack of communication here that you might need to deal with first, or
Ah.
and that sometimes even I find that their strategy isn't working, not because it's not a good strategy, not because they're not going about a good execution or anything. It's just things like that. You're not communicating well here. There's not a very good culture. You have left out of the loop a lot of feedback from your customers. A lot of times they have an idea of what they want. And I'll say, what kind of research or reach out feedback do you have from your
Mm-hmm.
customers on this? And they're like, well, it goes into what we plan. And I'm like, but your customers or your business. And if you are doing something, I mean, it may fall in line with what your, model is and everything. But if you don't have any feedback from your customers saying, yes, this is something that we
That I
will
want to
move,
buy.
yeah, or that we'll move into this next phase with you, they're already asking for it or something like that,
Hmm.
anything. And sometimes it's just what they want to do. And I'll say, this is where the risk comes in. This could easily turn into a money pitfall and a time pitfall for you. And I start telling me we have to go back and start doing some surveying and even some tests, put it out there and see how your customers react to it, respond to it. A lot of businesses are very surprised. They just assume, and sometimes that is a point. They assume that if they have a lot of customers and the
Hmm.
customer loves the business, that they're going to love everything they do. And one of my favorite lines is I tell a lot of businesses, this is how $1 million business fails. You have a great thing and you take it too far. That can happen very quickly.
Wow, I'm very impressed of what you just said because you're basically saying, yes, I'm coming in for finance, making sure there is alignment, but you're really showing that you cannot have that alignment without having that business knowledge. So
Yeah.
how did you go from being in the back office of like the JP Morgan, the Bank of America, seeing how things were done in the weeds for finance and accounting, and merge now to being that strategic CFO, that strategic consultant for businesses? Like, what are kind of some of the things that helped you along the way or made you shift your mindset, maybe?
Well, off the top of my head, the first thing is I'm a customer to a lot of
Nice.
business, and so I bring that a lot of that into my work. When I was at Bank of America, I did have for a while, like I said, I worked on the business side for a short while, but it helped
Mm-hmm.
me deal with the customers. My customers were internal other banks and things like that
Mm-hmm.
with the syndicated loans, but I also had to spend a lot of time putting out fires for them. They'll
Okay.
call it. We were supposed to get this millions of dollars of interest and we didn't get it. Where is it? We need it, or we got part of it. Things like that. Customer service
Mm-hmm.
was a big part of it. And I think having that at the top of my mind all the time is I love the numbers. But
Mm-hmm.
I also, one of the things that I really learned working from the front to the back
Mm-hmm.
was that the connection is the numbers don't happen if the customers aren't satisfied. And then I also learned as being a part of teams and things like that, and the business itself doesn't run well, it's all a puzzle. If the
Yes.
business doesn't run, if you don't have the customers that are satisfied, you don't have any reason to manage the numbers. You
Mm-hmm.
manage the numbers because everybody's happy. So I just have a holistic view of finance. And I think
Nice.
like I said, number one, I'm a customer to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things. And I always approach things thinking, I've seen myself. I think when I'm sitting with a business in initial meetings and things like that, I will think to myself, if I was a customer of this business, then I go from there. Or when I'm meeting with the teams, if I was a part of this business, what problems do I see that I would want confronted? And a lot of times it's just getting them started because a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
an outsider can see it's there. They
Mm-hmm.
know it's there, but nobody wants to say it. But once one person, that's why I love consulting because you come in and people, I spend the first couple of days just being their friend,
Mm-hmm.
letting get the barriers down and everything, and then the next, like maybe a week or two in, everybody's willing to open up, and then you can really
Nice.
start getting some work. Then you get the work done because now everybody has kind of put their guard down and they're willing to say, I have a problem with this is something I want to do, this is what I see and things like that.
Nice. And it definitely helps to have alignment
Yeah.
because sometimes you don't have that alignment because of lack of communication, because people are not willing to say what's going on. And that's always a barrier. And that's when you need to have those soft skills, even though
Yes.
you're a number person, how do you get to pull all those things out of them? So I'm curious to hear what are some of your go-to tips there for when you're trying to get buy-in or get people to understand or open up? What are some of the things you do? You said you're trying to be their friend. Tell us more. How are you doing this?
It starts with a mindset. I go to in everything with the mindset of putting myself in their shoes. And that means doing a lot of jumping because when you're meeting with the C suite, you have a different mindset because they think differently. So, and then when you're meeting with the team, you finally, first you start with the C suite and you get the buy in there. And one of the things I do is I first go into it with an ear, listening. And I think once you give them the time to talk and allow them to put everything on the table, their ideas, their plans, and you give them that sense of I'm there for you. I am not
Okay.
here. Although in the back of my mind I am thinking I am here to tell you what to do, but I don't go in with that mindset. I go in with first I want to know where are you at mentally? What do you want? What do you see happening? And when you give them that voice and you give them that feeling of this person understands me, and even though the next conversation may be no to everything you said,
Mm-hmm.
they are more comfortable with it because they have been allowed to really express themselves,
Nice.
and now they feel like she's heard me, so I can listen. I kind of think I might trust her on this because she has heard me. Because the first thing you will notice when people say, they'll say, you haven't even heard what I want yet, or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of take down a lot of the arguments. I have listened to you. I have given you a chance to express everything you want.
Wow.
Now let me tell you why it will or will not work. And
That's awesome.
they're more receptive to it if you go into it with the idea that I'm here for you. I'm here to work with you, for you. I'm listening to you, and then even spend some time talking with them about it. Even if
Mm-hmm.
in the back of your mind this isn't going to probably work, but you still have that back and forth with them that builds that trust. That when you
Mm-hmm.
do say, I think we need to move in another direction, they're like, okay, what direction do you think we should go in? Because now
Nice.
they have to buy in.
Nice. Now, you mentioned earlier that the executives, the C suites, thinks differently than the rest of the staff. Can you please bring more examples or flavor to that? Because that's something I didn't realize early in my career, right? Because you're in your world, you interact with your peers, or maybe you're the boss of your boss. But when the boss of your boss is not in the C suite, you don't understand that you don't have the same priorities, the same visibility, the same way of thinking. So what are some of the things you learned about working with the C-suite versus the rest of the staff?
That's a good question. And because I was a part of the staff and then moved into that more of a management area, I think it has to do with the culture of your businesses. I would say my last position at Citi really scoped that because we had an open floor. Management was right there. I could look right into my VP's office. He was on
Mm-hmm.
the floor a lot. And I think it also has to do with a lot of the shift in how businesses work now. A lot of the managers are younger. They were younger when I left,
Mm-hmm.
so they were very hands-on and out on the floor a lot, just talking to people. But I think it starts with building that relationship and understanding. Having One of the tips I would say is part of the relationship is more communication, more meeting, not meetings like meetings, but more of interaction, more of in more
Interactions.
interactions, and
Mm.
you get to not, I wouldn't say know what's in their mind, but hear a different tone from them. I'll give you an example. One time we had a problem on the floor at Citibank, and a lot of my team members were pretty much like, okay, what's the big idea? We got to fix this. We're going to get it done. Management was running, kind of furious. And I kind of took the side. I had the mentality of management because I had dealt with them a lot. I was in a lot of it. I knew from the interactions that I had with them that it's a big enough issue that people, the management over them, the big office was calling them and screaming about
Mm-hmm.
it. So they're like, what are they screaming about? And I'm like, it's because it's something that they're being screamed at about. Because everybody was like, why are they making such a big deal? I said, it's being made a big deal to them. So they have to make it a big
Mm-hmm.
deal to us. I think it's just getting and learning that. I think a lot of the disconnect is people think that management, number one, doesn't know what's going on, and most of the time they do. And they think, what does it, some things that
Wow.
affect us does, you always hear employees say, what do they care?
Mm-hmm.
They're the big guys, they're not going to be affected, but they are. They have a
Mm-hmm.
boss too, and that's how you have
Mm-hmm.
to see it. And when things
Mm-hmm.
go wrong, somebody has to pay for it. And they may be screaming at you, but that's because somebody has screamed at them. And that's
I was going to scream at
or
them.
it's going,
Yes.
yeah. And that's what I learned. It's like we all really are, they have a position, and that's kind of like where you
Mm-hmm.
can take away the titles. At the end of the day, we all work for this company. And our jobs is to, do the best we can for this company. What I learned quickly that when a manager is saying something or screaming or yelling or happy about something, I guess like they say, don't take it personal. It has to do with the business, and it's like get on board, get the same mentality that this is a problem. It needs to be fixed. Things like that. So I think the more you interact with management or with that other side, the more It's like how everybody's talking about the collaboration now with other areas. Even when I was working, we were very big on working with other areas, and you feel the pain points and things like that. And
Yes.
once you get that inside, it makes it very easy to communicate and understand their mentality and how to communicate with them.
Yes, because you see their realities, like you said, their pain points. And so now you have their perspective when
Yeah.
you talk to them or when you see issues. And I like what you said about you were on the same floor, you could see them, but now we remote. A lot of things are changing from that perspective. And so to me, some of the things that can help people is even if you cannot have those type of interactions at work, how can you create them outside of work? Maybe a community, maybe a mentor. What are some of the other ways somebody can start interacting with people in the C suite so they can understand how they think, but also start operating like them? Because that's really what allows you to grow in your career is how you are able to think about the next step, right? How you're able to act, operate like them. Like, what are some of the things maybe that helped you outside of work? Maybe books, conferences, like what kind of helped you outside of work to get there?
Helped me then and still helps me now. I spend a lot of time in webinars,
Mm,
a lot of things, a lot of time. I just join. I'm not there as a guest, and sometimes it doesn't even have to do with finance. It's just I like business in general.
mm-hmm,
The more you know about an industries and things like that, and you know how to better communicate with because I work with so many different industries. I enjoy going into webinars, reading books, yes, coaching, having a mentor. One thing that I heard years ago that I'm starting to hear again now is you don't always have to have a mentor that you go to and ask. Sometimes you can just pick someone to be your mentor.
mm-hmm,
And that's by just finding ways to spend time with that person, especially if it's someone that you work with. And what I used to do, I had a manager who was very interested in teaching, but of course, a lot of people were like, "That's the last thing you want to do is spend time with a manager." But what I used to do is every time I had a problem, and they would come out and say, "Maybe this is something I can help you with." Sure, whatever. A lot of people were like, "I don't want that person here at my desk. I can fix it. I know how to do it." I welcomed it.
mm,
Any interaction that I could have, even sometimes just getting coffee.
mm-hmm,
I would let them know, I had a problem with this. What do you think I should do about it? They would tell me, and I would be like, okay, and sometimes I didn't even have a problem. I would just have it, something I had a question about and go to them, catch them in a breeze. They would say good morning. I would say, hey, can I ask you a quick question?
mm-hmm,
Anything like that. And maybe it's the same person that you're asking, or make a list of questions. And throughout the week, as you see that person casually passing, ask the question.
mm-hmm.
And then, that's a form of mentoring, just regular, like back to the interaction and the communication. But I would definitely say, yeah, webinars now because we are
Virtual.
offline, virtual. But I do webinars. I do the books.
Okay.
I think coaching is good, and I think group coaching is good
Okay.
if you can get into that because it gives you so. I think one important thing now, in even finance especially, is getting different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
That helps a lot. And I think anytime that you can interact with someone that is either financial or non-financial, it's a
Yes.
benefit
Yes.
because just having that form of diversity in your thought
Mm-hmm.
is a huge help. And believe it or not, with numbers,
Mm-hmm.
you just get a different way of thinking about things. And I guess back to how much I love finance.
Yes.
Whenever I'm dealing with someone, even, that's in the back of my mind. How can I apply this? And sometimes I'm dealing with people in an industry that has nothing to do with me. But I always think this is interesting. How can I apply this to finance? You know?
Mm-hmm. No, it's great. And I love your advice about having questions ready, not having to say to someone, you're my mentor, but you
Yeah.
don't even know you're mentoring me because I'm getting to
Yeah.
understand how you think, which is so important when it comes to finance and strategic finance, especially is how you think, how you're going to build those scenarios, right? Because if you only think one way, then your base scenario and your worst case scenario will probably be about the same, right? You're just changing
Yeah.
something. You're not really adding variables or trying to see what are all the things, the possible risk, like you said earlier, that can happen. So definitely very valuable for, for people to know that about, especially about strategic finance. Now, would you say that when you have a CFO in place and you're dealing with clients, it's easier to get that alignment between strategy operations, or do you usually have to work with CFOs, work with the business owners to get there?
A little bit of both. It depends on back to the company and their culture and how they've been working. I would say it's more so dealing with having to deal with the CEOs and trying to get there. I have a little bit of both, but definitely more of that. It's
Okay.
more dealing with, the CEOs and trying to get to the path.
And now, when you're dealing with the CEOs, what are some of the one, two, or three things that you find challenging, especially as a finance person, to get across? Like everybody has their own assumptions of how CEOs are or how they think, and maybe they're not a number person, or maybe they came from strategy, from operations or sales. But what do you commonly see, and how do you navigate that?
Good question. I commonly see what is that because there's so many different things because it varies with, believe it or not, industry, and some of them are a lot easier. Some of them, I think it depends on how intense the work is
Okay.
for them. One of the things that I really, when I go in and I see that I deal with a lot, I think is thinking the biggest. I don't know if this falls under what your line you want to go towards, but the biggest thing I see with the CEOs is thinking when it comes to strategy. And the strategy, a lot of times I come in and I'm helping them pivot their strategy. They have a
Mm-hmm.
strategy and then now it's not working and they want to bring someone in like, why isn't this, what's going on? The main thing I see with CEOs is thinking that the strategy isn't working because the employees are not working hard enough. They're not trying hard enough.
Okay.
Yeah. And they think they have a good plan. They have a good plan strategy. The execution's planned out. And they'll say they want me to help the employees to work harder to make it work. That's the mentality. Yeah. And the first thing and I have to listen to that. And then I have to really look at, well, what is it? Let's look at, the current strategy that you have. And when I look at it, I see the things like I said before. They are working hard. It's that they don't have good communication. You aren't communicating well with them. And sometimes it is, you don't really have a good strategy here. A lot of times, I guess I could say, just to sum it up, it's the non financial things that are causing the problem.
Wow, the things that are hard to see on paper.
You spend a lot of time explaining to them how that ties back to the bottom line, how that affects finance. They'll say, we're not getting enough of this in the numbers, this in the numbers. And then when I say, well, okay, well, let's look at everything. And they'll be like, well, no, I just need them to do more of this. And I'm like, I get it. I know you want to get to this other side and you think the problem is they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So, and sometimes that may be the case.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do next is I listen to what the CEO says, everything, go out and I spend time with the team. Then I
Mm-hmm.
find out they're working hard. The problem is the process. It could be just the process of how they're doing what they're doing.
Wow.
That's the problem. A lot of times it's the communication, as I keep saying, the
Mm-hmm.
communication is an issue. The workflow. It's mostly the CFO thinking that the employees are the problem. And
Okay.
they don't think that something like the processes and things like that actually affect the numbers.
You know what? I've never seen it that way, but it's true. It's very true because sometimes you come in and what I realize too now that I'm in the C suite is the information you get up is quite filtered. Just because of the title you have may not be as open to say things like they would maybe to you as a consultant or, somebody else, but the information that gets to the top almost get filtered like, oh, maybe it's not that bad. And so yes, if nobody comes in and say, okay, you actually have to go and see what is really going on to understand why the strategy is not working. Is it really the systems? Is it the processes? Is it so many other things that can come into play? Or is it the market? Or like you said, the strategy is not working. That's very enlightening. Thank you so much for that insight. Now, my question to you is, what is the biggest challenge you may be facing right now? What's keeping you at night and how are you navigating it?
The biggest thing that I'm like a little pet project for me right now is AI.
Ah, okay.
Yes. I wouldn't say it's keeping me up at night, but it is sort of. I'm spending a lot of time going back to those webinars and things like that because obviously, it's the future or it's
It's
now, really.
here.
It's here. I wouldn't say it's a problem, but it's the challenge that I'm dealing with now. How my thing is, I'm trying to be as encompassed as possible. So I'm really trying to get a grip on AI and finance and how
Mm-hmm.
it's going to work in finance. How can I use this for my clients? And how can I use it for the different clients? Because clients will use it, need things from it differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really trying to get my head around that, spending a lot of time now, again, in webinars, doing a lot of reading, articles, a lot of research, everything that comes out. I'm trying to really figure this AI thing out and incorporating it into my work slowly now so that I don't fall into the catch up syndrome. And I'm just trying to incorporate it in slowly here and there. That's the biggest thing right now for me.
So, what have you picked up so far? Because one thing I really like is how you can take notes for you, but then you have to be
Ah,
careful because some of the information is confidential and stuff like that. So, what
yeah.
are some of the things that, maybe you've used already and you think is really going to make a big difference for finance?
One of the things that I've already started using it for with the clients a lot is during the research part. The research part, the work that I do with them when I come into consulting, come in as a consultant, I have incorporated AI in as far as getting more statistics and things like that on their specific industry. And that helps a lot. We're building a strategy or trying to pivot a strategy, even with narrowing in. Sometimes they do need help with a lot of help with narrowing in on specific metrics. If I'm dealing with a startup or a business that is kind of revamping their whole model and they're moving in another direction, and maybe they don't have a lot of historical data on a specific metric that they want to try to,
Mm-hmm.
I use AI a lot for
Nice.
the research piece of that. That's been a big help and a time saver, because the information's out there, but
Mm-hmm.
it's finding it. So to be able to get it within seconds and be able to compile it like in different years, different segments and things like that, and to have all that already sorted out according to the way. And that's another thing, getting into the prompts.
Yes.
And it depends on, you got to be able to ask it right. But
Uh-huh.
that's a huge part that I've been doing a lot with it, researching, looking up statistics and getting those numbers that way.
And I like what you say about getting in the right format, because then you bring it back the fact that you need to have that human intelligence, right? You need to
Yes.
have that knowledge and strategy of what you're looking for to use AI effectively, right? Because if
Right.
you don't know what you're looking for, you can ask whatever and you
Yeah.
may not have the result. But I feel like it's good that, and that's what I'm excited when I think about AI is you have to still have that knowledge and
Yeah.
then it will help you. But if you
Yeah.
don't, it's not going to be very useful, right?
And that's one of the things I'm learning when I'm in the webinars. And I'm trying to, whenever I see someone, and LinkedIn's been a huge help because there's a lot of people on there who specialize in it and they're
Mm-hmm.
running a lot of LinkedIn lives, they're having webinars, and they're talking a lot about how to get the, whatever it is you're trying to get at. Because a lot of people are just going in, you ask it a question, and that's very general.
Yes.
And I'm learning how to be a little bit more specific and even broaden that. Sometimes I always thought the shorter you ask the question, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm learning with AI, it's the opposite. The
Mm-hmm.
more detail that you give it, the more detail you would get back.
True. Yeah, I'm learning that too. So it's great to hear you doing it. But it's quite impressive, right? You've been in finance for 20 years and now there's AI and you're not like, oh, I already know it. You are in the
Yeah,
forefront of, okay, I need to learn this, right? To be
yeah,
ahead. And I think that's something that we should all be thinking about and intentional about is keep learning, keep sharpening that knowledge.
yes. That's a must. That's an absolute right now because things are moving so fast. And even after AI, there's still probably more to come.
We have to be ready.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Beverly. This is such a joy. Thank you so much for coming in. And I will drop the link to your website, how people can find you on LinkedIn and elsewhere, how people can get in contact with you to help them in the strategic finance. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Have a great day.
Thank you. You have a great day.
That's it for today's episode of the Diary of the CFO. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any topic you would like me to cover in the future, please send it to ask@thediaryofthecfo.com. Again, send an email to ask@thediaryofthecfo.com. If you connect me on LinkedIn, you can just send me a DM. The reason I need it is because I want to make sure I bring you the insight you need to be a better leader and be better at life. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave a review, subscribe, and share it. And I will see you next in another episode of the Diary of the CFO. Cheers.